everyone, thank you very much for watching or listening today. Liam Hartree here with another episode of Presenting Champions. Today joined by a very special guest, boxing legend Scott Sigmon, known as Cujo. Had a 52 fights professional career, fought some of the best, including Kelly Pavlik and Roy Jones Jr., among others. Today we're going to be talking about his exciting boxing journey, reaching a very, very high level in boxing, as well as the mentality and the discipline that it takes to reach such a high level. We're also going to be talking about his life outside of boxing as well, including training, coaching, promoting, and everything else he's doing nowadays as well. But before we get into any of that, Champ, thank you very much for coming on the show, and it's a pleasure to have you here. Thank you.
I appreciate your interest in my life.
It's a pleasure. So, like I was saying just now, starting at the, not so much at the beginning, but starting with the present day and working our way backwards. I think a lot of boxing fans out there and other fighters would be interested to know some of what you're working on today, obviously with your gym, with training, coaching, promoting, all that side of things. So, please share with us a little bit about the work you're doing in other areas of boxing other than fighting, if you get what I mean.
Yeah, so I have my 22nd show that I've either been the promoter or the co-promoter on coming up November 19th here in Lynchburg, Virginia. I actually just looked up the statistics the other day. I thought it was pretty cool. There's been 15 shows in Lynchburg, Virginia in the history of boxing, dating back to 1910 was the first. And out of those 15, this is my 8th out of the 15. So I've done more than half the shows in the history of my city.
Wow, that is amazing, and obviously it's very important to you to give these fighters an opportunity. Talk to us a little bit about what you enjoy most about the promoting role, because obviously a lot goes into pulling a show together. I mean it's probably rewarding, stressful, probably a mix of things. What do you enjoy most about the promoting side of things, please?
Yeah, so I think it's probably my least favorite thing to do in all of boxing. So it's more about I enjoy being a manager. I also enjoy being a trainer. I like building those personal, more intimate relationships with the fighters, knowing their stories. Every fighter's story and every fighter's journey is different. A perfect example of that is Kelly Pavlik was at my house one day a few years after we fought, and he was talking about, Cujo, imagine all the kids that came through those Youngstown, Ohio programs and stuff, but I was the one that made it. I was the one, and and I agree, like Kelly Pavlik is one of the greatest fighters to ever live, in my opinion. He's definitely the best fighter I shared the ring with. No knock against Roy Jones, but I fought the old man version of Roy. Still pretty formidable, still enough to beat me, but not. Pavlik was much closer to prime. And, then I had kind of an epiphany, and I told Kelly, I was like, well, Kelly, there was no amateur programs. There was no boxing promoters. There was no fighters in my city for like 40 years until me. And now, there's a ton of fighters from my region. Some I've worked with, some I haven't. But indirectly, I've had impact on all these people. I hate to mention her name because her and I had a bad falling out at the end of our relationship. I'm really proud of her successes. Britton Beltran, or Britton Hart, she's the, I think, 115 bare knuckle champion. I got her career started. There's Joe Jones, who fought at the high level at cruiserweight. He was sparring with me at 16 and 17 years old. And I'm not saying they wouldn't have made it with me. He helping open some of those doors, and sparring that fire helped him a lot. And of course, all the fighters I've worked with outside of that, Rumpler, Rocky Zapata, Josh Robertson, and Austin Deonda.
Yeah, incredible. I love that. I've got so much respect for that, giving back, contributing to people's lives, giving people opportunities that they may not have had, and obviously being so humble about that. It's a wonderful thing. Same type of thing for the managing, the coaching roles. What does it mean to you to see these people succeed? I mean, you mentioned just the more intimate relationship there, the more up close and personal aspect of it there. When you're seeing these people succeed step by step, can you share with us some of your favorite moments of some of those journeys? Because I think it's such a special thing, the work you're doing, if you get where I'm coming from with this,
Yeah, and it's just all their stories are different also, just like the difference between me and Pavlik. I was never a talent enough to become world champion like Pavlik did. And he put in the work and everything also. It wasn't just God-given. So, I took it as far as I could. And I think probably the most enjoyable moment for me moving forward is probably going to be Austin Deonda. I think the amount of doors I open for kids like him, he's ultimately going to bust through doors I never could. He's just that type of athlete. But, looking back, I had a guy that was in prison for a long period of time. He ultimately succumbed to his demons, but just seeing him having some of those pro fights and some of those wins and having that positive impact in his life, Chauncey Fields, that was a high for me. I had a fighter named Somner Martin who came over from MMA, and he told me his dream was to fight in Vegas. And like his third or fourth fight, we fought on the undercard of Derevyanchenko Nicolo, who I was managing Nicolo at the time. And, Somner fought in Vegas in his fourth fight with me. But Somner also, I believe Somner was maybe 5-5. And we fought this 19-3 fight hometown. And Somner knocked him out. And I don't know that there's been quite a high for me like that one. That was pretty big. Just Jesse Nicolo walking out to the ring to fight Derevyanchenko, that was a really positive moment. Or when I got the fight done for Nicolo to fight Murata in Japan on New Year's, I know that was a huge moment for Jesse. Jesse's another guy like me, a high-level gatekeeper. So, we were never talented enough to become world champion. Actually, Jesse may have been. I think he was like the third best amateur in the world at one point. So, but he kind of burned out later in his career. I also had a fight named Jess Noriega. I think maybe 2-10, like a real journeyman. Got him Eric Gove in Baltimore, and the guy was 3-0, and it was so much trash talk. They were talking about how he was going to run over Jess, this and that. And the guy was piecing Jess up early in the fight, and Jess threw a right to the body and left hook to the head and knocked him out cold. That was a really high moment for me also.
Amazing. It's incredible, the journey you've been on, and like I say, getting back, it's such a valuable thing. It's really one of the highest things people can aspire to when you've reached that high level yourself, to then give back to people coming through. Now, before we go back into your own boxing career and some of the key fights and everything, when I put this interview out, it's going to be all around the world and everything. So we're in a great position for you to pass on just a little bit of advice here for maybe young up-and-coming athletes in different countries who want to learn and progress and sort of be the best. Now, I know there's probably more wisdom you can share than we'd have time for today by all means, but if you had to give one or two key pieces of advice for young athletes around the world, having reached the levels that you have, having managed and coached and helped so many people, what would those be if there were certain key ingredients that you wanted to share, if you get what I mean with this one?
I think especially guys aspiring to boxing, especially if you want to go all the way or get close to all the way, the journey is going to be so much longer than you can ever anticipate. It's going to be so much harder. I don't think you should celebrate in those smaller fights early on when you're knocking those types of guys out. You really need to be focusing on, like I tell Austin all the time, he'll do really good against guys like 5-1 in the gym and cut this and that. He'll come back to the corner and I'll just be like, Austin, that guy touched you here and here. Soon you're going to be fighting guys like Matt Korbov, Kelly Pavlik. These guys, you can't make any mistake because it's almost like they're not even human. Like they're so good, they're so talented. Like Austin has sublime athleticism, but all those guys do too. He's got great work ethic, which sets him apart. A lot of guys at the early stages, they're athletically gifted, they don't have that work ethic, but those guys do too. I think just always be focusing on the end result and how tough it's going to be. Don't get content with just blowing out the mid-level guys. And then, if a prospect ever gets to a point of fighting a gatekeeper like me and then they beat me, that doesn't necessarily mean that you still have the tools to go to the very next level. Just safe enough to stay away from a guy that comes over a huge amount of punishment. And probably the second most important thing is do your research, form a great partnership, because boxing's a business. And beyond it, right? I think he's going to be my greatest work after my career to this point. And he and I have formed a business partnership, right? So like, I don't know that he could probably still go pretty far, but he would not go nowhere near as far without me. And I would have nobody to manage without his talent. And the other day, he and I were talking business. One of the other coaches told him that I was risking as much as he was. I do disagree with that, though, because Austin's still the one that gets in the ring and you can die in a prize fight. So I'd say we're 51-49 and Austin's the boss.
I like that. I like that a lot. There's some solid advice there, and hopefully people will pick up on that, and that will have a little bit of an impact on their lives, wherever they are. Now, moving back into your boxing career itself, a little bit more. Now, obviously, we've got too many fights there to talk about them all today, so maybe we just talk about some key ones. But before we get into the specific fights, in your own words, I'd like to get into your proudest moments. I mean, you did touch on this just now with Kelly Pavlik and fighting him and the difference with Roy and things like that. But I think we're going to start here because you shared some of your proudest moments so far of coaching, promoting, managing, everything you're doing. But in terms of when you look back on your actual boxing career now, what are the moments that are the most special to you? Maybe there's one, maybe there's more than one, I don't know. But in your own words, please share that with us.
Try to keep it as limited as possible. So obviously my pro debut, boxing people know I was brought in as the B side. Kid, I was pretty poor, so they were paying me $1,000. I was fighting this guy. I think his name was Hassan Abdul Gilliard. He was 2-0. I was just a sparring partner for guys in the gym that wanted to keep me active, and I knocked him out. I think I knocked him out in the third round. So obviously that was a proud moment. I don't think I realized how big of a deal it was then as I do now, knowing when you're being brought in to slaughter and to overcome that, how big of a moment that is. The first fight in Lynchburg, I sold 1,400 tickets by hand. I was 5-1. I fought my first 8-rounder. I fought a guy that was 14-2. Just to feel into that crowd, bringing back to Lynchburg after 27 years. I'd say avenging the loss to Jesse Niccolo, who I did later manage. He and I have a whole podcast just over he and I's relationship. But Jesse beat me 4 years prior. I think I was 9-1. He was 18-2. He beat me in a 10-rounder in Baltimore, and I brought him down to Lynchburg, and I ended up beating him 9-0 and stopping him in the 10th. That was a really big moment. You brought up the Pavlik fight. Honestly, I feel like that was probably one of the lowest moments of my career, just because I can't say that I wasn't being honest with myself because I didn't know better, but I really believed because in Virginia, I was beating the Golden Glove heavyweight champions and stuff, so I really believed that I was going to run over Kelly Pavlik, and then you got to get the experience at that top level, but to know better. And I just had no experience with people like that. So I'd say the first fight in Lynchburg, my pro debut, and the rematch with Jesse Nichols, probably my 3 highlights of my boxing career.
Amazing. I love asking that question because it's not always the answer that you expect, and I totally get where you're coming from. But you never know. When I ask different champions that, you never know what's going to come back. So it's amazing to share that. And out of so many, I know it's a big question. So thank you for being such an open book about that. Now another couple of things here. Well, another thing just to touch on. Obviously, people are going to want to know about the Roy Jones Jr. fight. So I'm just going to get that in here sooner rather than later because obviously other fighters will want to hear about it, but especially from boxing fans' point of view, it's going to be a favorite. So you mentioned earlier that you obviously fought the old man version. He was past his prime, but he was still very, very good. I mean, there's no two ways about that. Just share with us, please, your memories from the fight, the highs, the lows, what it means to you now, having had obviously time to reflect on it. Just be great to hear about that fight in your own words, really.
So Roy and I almost crossed a couple of times through my career down in North Carolina fighting in Charlotte. And every time I tried to approach the fight, the weight didn't work out or something like that. No, I never negotiated with Roy. So he fought Bobby Gunn, and I think it was in Delaware. And one of his female fighters fell off last second. He had flew the girl in from Germany or somewhere like that already and needed to match up. I matched her, got the fight done for him. And Roy got his, man, he's going to hate that. McGee got on the phone and was like, hey, you know, Roy said if you can always have his last fight, you can always have his last fight, which I heard Roy's getting the itch to come back, so maybe I won't get the last fight. And so Roy promised me that. And then I had broke my hand in August, which this is all unfortunate circumstances. I'd never bring this up, but Roy did bring up the fact he tore his bicep after the fight. So I'll go ahead and make all of my excuses. So, you know, I broke my hand in August in a fight. Got real heavy. I had been fighting like 75 and 68. I got real heavy. I got bronchitis like end of December. And then I seen Roy post on Facebook, oh, I'm fighting my last fight February 8th. And I thought, oh, great. You know, I'm coming back from a broken hand. I got bronchitis, but I'm going to have to take the fight. So, I mean, I wrote like on Facebook, you know, Roy, I'm calling in a favor or something. And I think I tagged Dean Toole in it. Dean had something to do with the fight. And I can't remember if it was Dean or if it was McGee that called me. And we got the deal done in like 5 minutes. I told him I just needed to spar to make sure my hand would hold up all right. So we got that done. I get to the fight. And, you know, strangely, it wasn't like a lot of pressure on me. It was like, I don't know, I was really happy to see. I looked across, I seen Roy there. And it was just like, we were talking some fun trash in the ring. You know, I was telling him he was tired. And then he'd hit me with a combination. And I told him, well, you are one of the greatest of all time or whatever. And then after the fight, I was like, you know, how many rounds do you think I won? I think I won 5, and I winked at him. And he was like, because I didn't really believe it. I thought I probably won 2 rounds. And Roy told me he thought I won 3. So then I go into the back, and he goes to the press conference. And Roy sent some people for me to come to the press conference. He wanted me there with him. And then after the press conference, you know, everybody got in line to see him. And Roy asked for my mother. And my mom didn't know anything about boxing when I got into it, but she remembers Roy Jones. And I remember my mom got to the front of the line with Roy, and he put his hand on her shoulder and told her something like, you should be proud of what your son done here tonight or something. It like just broke my mom. But I mean, it's hard to say after you've been in a fight with a man like that and he beats you up. But I mean, he's a sweet, genuine person, a really caring person, especially for somebody that, you know, accomplished that height. Like, you know, you talk about my accomplishments. I mean, come on, man. Like Roy done all that in a day. So I mean, it's really refreshing to see somebody like that. And then, of course, you know, got the gloves hanging behind me. That's the gloves I fought Roy in. He signed them to me and whatnot. Yeah, so I mean, I loved everything about it besides losing. But I mean, there's worse people to lose to than Roy Jones.
Absolutely. What a story. What a story. It's a funny thing, actually. I've had a few guys on the show who've, you know, met Roy and worked with him or fought him or done, you know, been involved with him in different ways. And they all say that, you know, about his character and about his nature. I mean, I've not met him personally, but it must be a testament to something, because quite a few people have said that. Amazing achievements, something to be very proud of. Now, another thing here, when we look at, obviously, all the fights you had, over 50 fights, as I mentioned at the beginning, different names you fought. I mean, I mentioned a couple there at the beginning, but I think I missed out a couple as well. People always want to hear about toughest fights. I mean, the thing is, I'm not a huge fan of the question, because toughest fights can come in different forms. You know, I mean, it can come in, obviously, from a technical perspective, from a power perspective, from the perspective of something that's going on outside the ring, like you said about the hand and the bronchitis and everything. So it's not really a linear thing. But people still always want to hear about it. I get requests about this all the time. So when you look back on your career and you think of the toughest fights that you had, in whatever form that takes, you know, which ones would they be? Which ones sort of stand out for you along those lines?
Yeah, so I mean, the toughest fights and also who's the best opponent, right? So, I mean, the best person I fought, and he actually didn't give me the most problems, which is hard to believe, based off of what I look like after the fight. But Kelly Pavlik, as far as everybody I've been in the ring with sparring, fighting, and this is no disrespect to anyone I fought, because I fought a lot of guys that are probably going to end up being in the Hall of Fame one day. I honestly believe you could line up maybe any 2, 3, or 4 of them guys in Kelly Pavlik, and I fought the guy right before the end. So, and I think Kelly Pavlik beats him. I mean, this man, he was a freak. Like early in my career, I was very punch resistant. I had never been hurt. I've only been down once in my whole career. It was like fight 51. So, I mean, of course, it was the mileage that caught up to me. But Pavlik was the best person I fought. The toughest fight I had either came against Phil Benson. I did have pneumonia in that fight, but also stylistically. At that point in my career, I was a guy that got low, and he was very good at throwing uppercuts. He broke both my orbitals. He put a ferocious beating on me. Then the other two fights that come to mind are Lionel Thompson, who I hate has seen sit on the shelf. You know, he beat Derek Finley and me back-to-back, two top-level gatekeepers, and then he destroyed Uzcategui. I really wish he would have been the man to get the call next. His jab was incredible, and, you know, I was a real slow-footed fighter, so having a guy with a jab like that was real fleet of foot. Plus, he was really good at managing his wrist. Probably around 4 or 5, you could hear people wanting him to come in and finish me, but he knew he hadn't really broken yet. So he spent a couple more rounds really tenderizing me before he stepped on the gas. Then outstanding Armenian amateur, and now he fights with either Tiger Management out of Canada, is Eric Bazinian. Now, obviously, I had a lot of mileage on him, so that certainly played into it. He's the only man to knock me down, and he almost knocked me down twice. Great right hand, really strong. I know he had a lot of like world-class experience. I'm pretty sure he spars with Beaver and Lemieux before he retired. So I'd say those are my toughest fights and the toughest opponents I faced. Now, you know, well, I guess also you could say the Truax fight. He broke my ribs in the first round. I had to suffer through that the whole time. But, you know, all these guys, Truax became world champion. Korobov was a world champion. Lionel Thompson certainly could be a world champion if he got the right Pavlik in the Hall of Fame. So it's no discredit any of my opponents. I fought so many great fighters, but just for me, the toughest matchups, the only one I'm willing to say is definitely the best out of all of those is Pavlik, though. He's one that I feel like is head and shoulders above the rest as far as his talent and physical attributes.
Absolutely. Well, it's amazing because there's so many great names. Like I said to you at the beginning, you know, I wasn't sure which, but there's a few of those you mentioned, and I'm not surprised. But there's a few, you know, you don't expect. But yeah, shout out to all of them, all talented in their own way. Kelly Pavlik, he's been on this show, great guy. When I interviewed him, Truax, yeah, I was there as one of the ringside photographers when he became world champion. That was an amazing night. So there's so many names you mentioned that just, I mean,
Truax, he's about as nice as they come in by too. I remember he came to the bar to see me after the fight and apologized to me for breaking my ribs. Crazy. He's like, "I'm sorry, champ. I'm sorry. I hope it gets better soon."
Yeah, that's right. That's right. It's amazing. There are a lot of guys at the high level who, you know, they do have good hearts in them. You know, some not so much, but there are a few. Now, another couple of things to touch on here as we sort of move into the last sort of phase of this interview and everything is at your peak or during your career. Obviously, the physical training is important, and I'd like to touch up a little bit on like what your regime was during your career there. But I'd also like to touch on the mental side of preparing for a fight, because I feel that it's overlooked a little bit. You know, people don't talk about it enough. Funny enough, Kelly and myself, I think we spoke about this. But obviously, you have to have a very strong mind as well as a strong body to do what you do. So can you walk us through a little bit about sort of both sides of your training during your boxing career, what your routine was physically, but how you mentally got ready for a big fight as well? That would be really cool to get the inside track on, you know?
Yeah, so let's talk about the side first. So the first 25 to 27 fights was easy mentally because I basically had whipped myself into it. I really thought that I was the baddest man on the planet. So I was never scared of anybody. If you go back and watch the Pavlik fight, he was the first one that started to break me mentally. But it took several fights after that before I realized what I was. If you look in that fight, Pavlik had pounded me into a pulp. And even round 6 and 7, before they stopped the fight, I was still trash talking him. I was telling him I was going to knock him out. And I truly believed that in that moment. So that first half of my career, it took, you know, I lost to Jalen Love on short notice. It wasn't until Gavril, another great fighter who almost beat David Benavidez in their first fight. It wasn't until I fought Ronald Gavril on the undercard of Mayweather Berto when I started to realize I had been to a high level and had gotten picked apart pretty bad multiple times, I realized I probably wasn't ever going to be world champion. So then the way I shifted it, which I would never want it, now it would all depend on the fighter, like I said, but the way I took the pressure off myself, like I would never want Austin Ganda to think this way, because I truly believe that he has a shot to be the best in the world. So I would never want him thinking this way. But I was probably, I had 7 losses at the time, maybe 8. And now, I beat 22 guys in my career with winning records. I mean, I wasn't a pushover. I can't beat guys to be world champion. I'm just not that talent. So what I started telling myself was, I never thought about losing in any fight. If I was supposed to win or lose, I never thought about winning or losing. I just thought about I would have like 1 or 2 game plans, and just thought about doing the best I could. So I didn't get caught up in what the score is or this or that. I just did the best that I could every round. But like I said, I think it all depends on the fighter on a personal level, because in some ways that could be looked at as a loser's, but trust me, I never wanted to lose. That's not what I'm saying. So early on in my career, I was an animal. I was a machine. I'd jump rope for an hour. I would spar 30 to 50 rounds a week. I'd hit the heavy bag for an hour. I mean, it was just insane. But at the end, it ended up catching up to me. I had a lot of injuries. For the Arias fight, guy that went really far, I decided I was going to cut down to 160 after being 168 my whole career, having 3 or 5% body fat. And me and Kelly talked about me going to 160, and he told me that, Scott, just because you can make weight doesn't mean that you should. Now, I didn't know what he meant. So the first fight I made 60 for Korbov, I felt a little rough afterwards, but I was like, oh, it's fine. But I actually only made 60. I didn't make 60. And then I made 58 to fight Arias. I probably ate 600 calories a day for like 4 weeks going into that. We had basically boiling bath water I ate. And I felt good the first round, and then my stamina just tanked. And so a lot of people don't know this and haven't talked to them about it, but I think this is something young fighters should know too. Like, overtraining in endurance athletes is really serious. Starving yourself is really serious. So I went and got my testosterone levels checked after that fight, because I didn't feel good for a few weeks. So it took me about 6 months of resting, only lifting weights, and I'm talking barely lifting weights, and eating really healthy. And if you look after that fight, I moved to cruiserweight for a while. My thyroid was messing up. My testosterone was very low for 6, like as low as a 100-year-old man's. So when you start abusing your body to that degree, like, people always talk about more is better in training. That is not true. You should not be logging 100 miles a week as a prize fighter. It shouldn't be happening. An hour of jump rope, that's excessive, right? Like, you got to be quality over quantity with the training for sure.
Yeah, that's powerful advice. I mean, to be honest with you, it's very cool, because we're learning here from the things you got right and the things you got wrong, because obviously you've been around and done a bit of everything, and I think that's I don't know how to put this, but I think that's equally as valuable as obviously the things you got right. You did great, but something like the overtraining, I mean, that's a valuable lesson. I've seen that happen in the game, in camp as well, or sometimes in back-to-back camps, people don't have the right rest periods and things. It does happen, so it's very, very valuable advice. Moving into pretty much the last thing, just to wrap up with this, really, as the last question, is your future plans. I mean, obviously we've taken the time to look back, we've taken a little bit of time to talk about the present day. The last thing for me to touch on before we wrap this up, because I have to be finished sort of on the hour roughly, is just where you want to go from here. I mean, you've got some very, very talented fighters. You've mentioned some of their names. Obviously, it sounds like you want to keep taking them to the next level and the next level type of thing. But from here on out, looking over the next few years and things, what's really lighting your fire? Is it to continue with the management side of things, the promotional side of things? Are there other things that you're lining up? Just talk with us a little bit about the future, please. That would be great to hear about that side of things,
Well, I feel really fortunate that I make my full-time living in boxing. A lot of guys don't get to do that, especially guys that don't become world champion, and I, like we touched on, wasn't quite talented enough. But, I used the entrepreneur spirit, and, I got the gym. I enjoy the gym, but it's not my favorite thing because I obviously don't get to work with fighters all the time. So, we're going to see where, I got some more mid-level type guys that are coming along, and I got two guys that are good. Rocky Zapata, who's 7-3-5, who was really mismanaged, he's a really tough fighter. I'd like to see how far I can get him. I'd also like to see how far I can get, Austin Deonda. I really feel like he has a shot to go all the way. I got another fighter, a bantamweight, Owen Hilton, and obviously it's his choice of how far he goes. I've told him, I think he has limitations, much like I did, but that's not my choice. It's ultimately his choice. I want to see how far he can go. I want him to have a successful career. I feel like he's going to be a great coach after boxing also, so maybe he'll take over the gym. I guess I'll see how things play out with, my partnership with Southpaw Promotions and Billy Blea, see how Austin's career and Rocky Zapata's career goes. And I'll probably find myself somewhere in like being a matchmaker, manager, or promoter type, maybe a trainer in the end. I'd really like to be a manager more than anything. And I hope the good Lord doesn't see fit to make me a matchmaker, because that has got to be the worst job in boxing. But I feel like I keep getting pulled towards it.
Yeah, amazing. Well, I'm sure the future is very, very bright because, there's such a wealth of knowledge and expertise and everything that you can bring to, basically, the simplest way to put it, making sure that fighters go down the right path. And as you say, everyone's a little different, and I hear you on that. But definitely, making sure that they take the right steps to get matched the right way and everything. It's a valuable thing in whichever avenue you go down. It's valuable work. I'd like to thank you for your time today, champ. It's been an absolute pleasure. It's been really good to get the inside track. Obviously, with these interviews, there's always more that you can talk about, but I still think we've touched on some nice stuff, on some good material here. Is there anything else you'd like to say to your fans and supporters around the world before we wrap this up? Just as a last thing, actually, of anyone who during your career they watched you fight, they paid to see you fight, or anything. If any of those people are watching this, or anyone who supported the gym, like your loyal people, basically, would you have any words for them just before we wrap this up?
Yeah, I think that there's two people I would have, three sets of people I would have never made it without. Obviously, first, my mother. She was my first fan, the first person who believed in me. I think I'm very fortunate for the support from the community. Obviously, you're a fight person. You're in boxing. The support, the fact that 1,000 people would travel, 500 people would travel to go see me fight, that made all the difference in my career. That's why I had 52 pro boxing matches and 53 total professional fights was the backing. And finally, my manager and the person that made it possible for me to make it, made me want to become a manager, Charles Crumpler. He's the behind the scenes guy. Nobody knows who he is. But Charles, I love you, bro. I would never want to do without
you. Amazing. Yeah, that's really good to give them a thank you, because no man's an island at the end of the day. And even though we've been focused on you and your career, there's obviously other people around. So I just had the feeling that there was somebody you wanted to thank. Really, I don't know where that came from, but it's good to give them a mention as well. Thank you very much for your time. I obviously appreciate you taking time out of your day for this, because you're very busy. I appreciate you being such an open book about the highs and the lows and everything that we've talked about. So thank you. I've enjoyed it, and I hope you have as well.
Thank you, Liam. I look forward to sharing this video with people.
Thank you very much for watching. Please subscribe to the Simply Inspired YouTube channel, and there'll be more videos coming soon.